Review copy provided by Xbox Games. After the series has laid dormant for years with the disastrous release of Ninja Gaiden 3 and Yaiba, Ninja Gaiden has made a triumphant return in 2025, making it truly the year of the ninja. It started with the somewhat frustratingly released Ninja Gaiden 2 Black at the start of the year, which had the chance to finally give Ninja Gaiden 2 a definitive edition, but instead it's another version to add to the pile, as it adds and takes away from both the original Xbox 360 release and from the Sigma 2 release for the PlayStation 3. At the end of July, we got Ragebound, a side-scroller made by the developers of Blasphemous, and while I haven't gotten around to making a video on it, I thought it was really fun. Now at the end of October, we finally get our first mainline entry in 13 years, and it's being developed by Platinum Games, overseen by Team Ninja. Platinum has suffered a massive exodus of most of its major iconic talent, and it really felt like we were watching the Platinum we knew and loved cease to exist in real time. I'm still mourning the loss of Project GG. Their contributions to Delta were great, but this is the first real test to see if Platinum still has its luster, or if we are entering a gilded era of a zombie studio with the same name. Ninja Gaiden 4 is Platinum's do or die. So, did Platinum do it? Did they manage to win back some faith that Unk still got it? Yeah, I'd say so. I do think that we need to wait till they release something completely on their own before we can say for 100% certain, because for all we know, this game was as good as it is solely because of Team Ninja's supervision and designing the blueprint. It does have some things I'd like to see tweaked in future updates that we'll get into over the course of the video. In the months leading up to this game's release, I replayed both Ninja Gaiden Black and Ninja Gaiden 2. I think Ninja Gaiden Black is still my favorite in the series, but as of right now, 4 is a close second. I've come around a lot on Ninja Gaiden 2 since I last played it in 2019. I think I'd like it way more if I was able to actually play the original version at a stable 60 FPS without horrible slowdown and tons of bugs like it plays on an Xbox 360. Xenia keeps giving me too many issues every time I try to emulate it, so until I get an Xbox Series X for its backwards compatibility functions, my only options are laggy mess that constantly eats inputs, or input delay riddled subpar re-release that is missing content. 4 is by far the fastest of any of these games. It feels like what I'd imagine Ninja Gaiden 2 plays like at 120 frames running at 200% speed. It's so fluid and addictive that I had a hard time putting it down to make this video, and my Halloween video, which will for sure not make the deadline because of it. I always loved the grounded feel of Ninja Gaiden Black in a similar way to how I adore DMC1's game feel compared to the rest of its series, but I welcome this complete opposite end of the combat speed spectrum. There are a few attacks and animations, mostly ones from aerial attacks that slam down onto the ground, leave you animation locked, which feels out of place in this game when basically every other attack and or animation is something that you can cancel out of. I don't know why there is this specific stiffness on certain on-landing animations and attack recoveries. I bring this up because they really break the flow of what otherwise would be super smooth, fluid, and responsive combat and game feel. It's like the game turns into Neo and a Souls-like with super punishing recovery and commitment, but only for a few attacks, which don't feel that impactful and powerful enough to warrant that recovery and leaving you vulnerable for that amount of time. Ninja Gaiden Black also had my favorite art design and art direction of the series. Initially, I wasn't sold on the aesthetics of 4. I really hated how the HUD looked. I much preferred the bulky 2000s look of HUDs from 1 and 2, but after playing through the game for 40 plus hours, I have to admit that it has won me over. The menus for things like the shop and pause screens look so cool. I liked them way more than I ever thought I would have. They just desperately need to add an option to turn off the vignette when your HP is low. It's another game like Doom the Dark Ages from earlier this year, where it takes up way too much screen real estate when your HP is low. It's even worse here because the game is really dark, its main main color is this deep royal blue, which does look good, if not a little too overused for my liking, but the red clashes with the primary color used in every level, resulting in abysmal visual clarity. That is not something that you could afford in a game where you can die in 1 to 2 hits. When the vignette pollutes your screen, it really hurts the player experience. It also just makes the game straight up look worse. Enemies deal tons of damage, and it's not like I'm going to be amazing on my first playthrough, so I saw this vignette a lot since I was trying to beat the game without using items. I was expecting to be in the cyberpunk city a lot more than we actually were. Unfortunately, the location the game spends the most time is my least favorite, and that is the other dimension when chasing the shark. It's just really repetitive looking and super bland. Every hallway looks exactly the same, to the point I was finding myself getting a little lost in some of the more open areas where you are running across water. I've long since accepted that no action game is ever going to capture the magic of Ninja Gaiden Black and Devil May Cry 1's honeycomb Resident Evil Metroid-inspired level design ever again, and after years of terrible barren open world design infecting every series I play, I'll take the linear A to B straight lines with the occasional circular combat arena over shit like FF16's world design any day of the week. Though the over-reliance on the grind rail segments in every level really drags down the pace of them, and I fear will hurt repeat playthroughs. There really hasn't been an action game that has had this specific pick up and play story mode that I find myself continually going back to Devil May Cry 1 for. Everything nowadays either relies on a bloody palace-like mode or challenge trials. I loved Hi-Fi Rush, but each mission is like an hour long, if not more. Not exactly something you boot up for if you want a quick taste to pass some time. The grind rail and segments like it were initially charming enough and helped sell the speed, pace, and scale of the game, but they really start to get stale and wear out their welcome with how long and frequent they are by the time you get to the mountain area. They're also not nearly as interactive as their biggest point of comparison, the grind rails in Ratchet & Clank, as the only way to swap to other walls and rails is by hitting the bumper, instead of actually moving your character. So I ran into a bug a few times where the prompt simply would not show up and I was unable to actually jump to another location and ended up getting hit by a train over and over again. The way I got around this was simply mashing RB over and over again until it appeared for a single frame and Yakumo jumped to the safe rail with only a second to spare. Thankfully, the game does have trials, so if it ends up really getting in the way of my enjoyment for repeat playthroughs, I can thankfully spend my time there instead. On the topic of subsequent playthroughs, it's a mixed bag of things that they thankfully thought of and made skippable for repeat playthroughs like the opening tutorial, but then there is also a ton of annoying shit that makes doing Master Ninja extremely tedious and draining, which inadvertently reveals how quite awful the checkpoint placements are in this game, especially at the highest level. I know 2 Black gets a lot of shit for understandable reasons compared to the original version on the 360, but one thing that I do like about it is that I think it hit a pretty good sweet spot with its checkpoint placements, which makes beating your head against the higher difficulties a lot more bearable. In 4, there are so many animations and scripted sequences in-game that cannot be skipped, and you are forced to watch over and over again. Like, this is an issue in the literal first real combat encounter of the game when you have to stop and watch the helicopters come in, drop dudes off, which grinds repeat attempts to a complete halt. It makes it feel like a waste of time if I have to keep spending a minute watching this bullshit only to then die in one hit instantly and having to watch it all over again. I got stuck on the Fox Lady boss in Chapter 3 and actually had to turn off voice lines because I was so fucking sick of hearing the same goddamn lines over and over again. It gave me a serious headache having to listen to Umi and Sayori bicker in my ear saying the same stupid shit for over an hour. For the love of God, add a setting, or just make it by default not replay lines in subsequent retries after dying if you have already heard them. I love that they gave you an auto skip cutscene setting in the options, but it doesn't have that instant load times of a Sony game, so even with it on, and on my top of the line PC, I still had to watch a few seconds of any cutscene before it tries to auto skip. The only time it doesn't do this is when you play as Ryu and Yakumo levels in subsequent replays of the campaign. It just has a black wipe across the screen and then chapters will start. Getting back into the action after dying takes way too long for my liking. Every time you die in the story mode, you have to have one of the other characters cry out your name and watch the camera zoom out, and only then does the option to restart appear. It's like an extra 15 seconds if not more each time, which quickly adds up when you are stonewalled at a tough encounter that kills you in one hit. The only instance where the downtime between lives isn't an issue is in Purgatory challenge rooms, because you don't have to listen to the radio crying goobers call out to your name over and over again. I hate the slowdown that shows up between waves for the title card drops. It has legitimately caused me to get hit by enemies spawning right on top of me while I am stuck in a fighting your bully in a nightmare slow motion. Trials also have this problem, which makes beating your head against a brick wall trying to get triple S on all of them more tedious than it otherwise would be. The one difference is that the annoying slowdown in title cards is when you fail and die at the end of them. The game is very modular with its settings. Like, I don't know why you'd want to remove hit feedback, but that's something that you can do. Your HUD is very plug and play, pick and choose what you do and don't want on your screen. So fingers crossed these requests will get added in and their exclusions were simply an oversight. I love that they have things like the camera distance setting from DMC5 that every action game should be adopting. I'm super happy with all of the camera settings in general, love that it has subtitles and dub titles, as they are very different things and most games don't bother doing this, because if you are playing with English subtitles but Japanese voices, the vast majority of players don't speak the language and don't realize that the text is matching the English voices and not matching what the Japanese voices say. I like that the game has built-in challenge mode settings for those who want to make the game as unforgiving as possible and require complete perfection. Like Death Wish takes away all of your character upgrades. You can remove attack indicators if you want to study every single attack animation like it's an FF14 Savage raid. These settings are what I wanted from Doom: The Dark Ages, where that game felt like it made me try to balance the game myself to find what I wanted as if I was the gameplay designer, because you can tune granular shit like projectile speeds, which is something that the developers should be choosing in my opinion, not me. These are simply modifiers to add to the already designed experience. They are much closer to built-in Nuzlocke rules and other type of rules Pokemon content creators come up with, rather than balancing each enemy yourself. I feel like it doesn't come up that often, but I always do enjoy when an action game allows you to turn off certain upgrades and additional combos or mechanics. Don't like how a move feels and its inclusion messes with your muscle memory? Turn that bitch off and never think about it again. This is where I'm putting my spoiler warning, as from here on out I will be talking about specific late game mechanics and bosses in full detail, as there is no way to talk around them when discussing gameplay and my feelings towards it. I did not watch much preview content before the game came out, other than the reveal trailer and a few promotional images that passed my timeline, so I went in with no expectations as to how Yakumo would play, and if I'd like him. That's always the worry with new characters coming into an established franchise. I like Nero a lot as a character, but since I'm not a top-level DMC4 player, I did not love his gameplay style until 5. Even before finishing my first playthrough, I came out on the other side absolutely loving how Yakumo played. I do wish there were more dial combos like in previous games, and my replay of 2 completely spoiled me for arsenal lineup and size, but there is still plenty of meat to chew on with 4 weapons each with their own form change, which acts completely different compared to their base form. I didn't love the first weapon you get, the rapier drill combo, as it still, as of the time of making this, hasn't clicked for me. It's good at deleting boss health bars with the drill attacks, so that's appreciated, but it's the weapon I like the least. The ninja toolbox is a cool concept and feels great to use in practice. It's basically what if Pandora's box from DMC4 was a primary weapon instead of a gun, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that I wished a bunch of the weapons you see in 1 or 2 attack animations were their own fully realized additions to your arsenal, like the cleavers, the mace, the tonfas from 2. I miss you, Vigorian Flail, my beloved. Hopefully we will be reunited in the DLC. Bloodraven is super fun. I wasn't expecting it to click into place and tickle my brain as much as it did. Love the pole vault move your primary sword has. It's such a fun tool that can be used both defensively and offensively. It's so funny to see Bloodraven moves and parrying the red flash attacks keep being compared to Metal Gear Rising when they are just burst counters from Nioh 2. I've also seen it described as color-coded enemies and attacks, which is hilarious when they are more closely comparable to heavy attacks that break super armor. Have you people actually played a game with color-coded enemies and weapons like DMC Devil May Cry or Solstice, where the only thing you can even hit them with is the matching color and every other option doesn't do anything, or worse, staggers you with a bounce-off animation? In Ninja Gaiden 4, you can still perfect dodge and guillotine throw to interrupt these power attacks. Hitting these enemies with Bloodraven attacks or Gleam attacks is still the best option in my opinion, but it's not like it's the only option, like it is in games with actual color-coded enemies and combat design. The amount of inaccurate comparisons this game is getting to other Platinum titles and or broader action game design and trends is hilarious to read and laugh about, but also extremely frustrating due to the sheer prevalence and hostility people are screeching. Let me make it clear that I think it's fine to not like this game for whatever reason you may have. The same thing goes for liking it. There are definitely a loud group of people who will freak out at you if you say anything negative about the game during this hype cycle honeymoon phase we are currently in. Par for the course with modern media discussion and consumption, but I digress. The downside is that it will likely drown out legitimate critiques which can be addressed in updates. This last part is impossible to gauge how much of it is actually happening from the outside. Only those who work at Platinum, Team Ninja, and Microsoft truly know. Some of the shit I've seen people saying makes me question if they've even ever touched an action game in their life. In Metal Gear Rising, parrying is done like Third Strike by pushing the stick forward towards an enemy as you enter a parry stance. If anything, the parrying in Ninja Gaiden 4 is just how clashing works in Devil May Cry 3. It requires your attacks to intercept incoming enemy swings. Perfect dodge isn't witch time, as it's a brief slowdown that gives you a single follow-up of a choice from a handful of options. Witch time keeps you in active motion and normal speed while enemies are frozen in place. Berserk mode is not Ripper mode. Ripper mode is tied to the same meter as Zendatsu, so if you are using Ripper mode, you are actively using the resource that allows you to execute enemies for health. It also makes all of your attacks instantly slice enemies to pieces, so no Zendatsu there either. Berserk mode, which is its own meter, if it was also tied to blood gauge, the comparison would have more legs to stand on, gives you an insta-kill for fully charged Bloodraven and Gleam attacks. This meter is also per combat encounter as it starts to drain as soon as they end. It's use it or lose it, where the meter for Ripper mode can be saved for whenever you need it. There's actually more give and take with the design for Ripper mode, where Berserk mode has no reason not to use it, which is something that you could argue about the lack of design depth and the overall lack of certain designs in this game, but personally I don't care in this instance as I used the trinket that turned it off and made bloodbath kills randomly happen anyway. When I didn't have this trinket on, the issue that I actually ran into with this meter and system is that it was only full by the time I reached the end of encounters, so I rarely actually had multiple enemies to use it on, even when playing on Master Ninja. There are legitimate comparisons to be made for Ninja Gaiden 4 to other games, like the stealth kills that are straight up from Metal Gear Rising. The story structure and somewhat incomplete back bit of this game makes Devil May Cry 4 the most accurate comparison out of the ones people have been flinging around, even if this game feels way more complete compared to Devil May Cry 4. But stuff like this gets drowned out in the complete off-base comparisons and deranged ramblings people have been spewing since launch. It's not like it was ever good to begin with or before it, but social media has made discussing games so fucking awful and a complete waste of time. The visual effect that happens when you do a bloodbath kill from hitting an enemy with a fully charged Bloodraven attack in Berserk mode or randomly with the trinket equipped is one of the most stylish looking things ever. It makes every combat encounter it shows up in 1,000 times more satisfying. It was exactly what I was talking about in my Lost Solicide review that was missing when you beat bosses and it abruptly cuts to them falling over. I'm really happy they have the Ashen Pipe, which makes bloodbath kills become a random trigger in exchange for losing Berserker mode. I didn't really care for the kind of meh devil trigger that also gives you a screen wipe. It was much more satisfying for it to randomly happen in combat encounters and feel like a further expanded version of obliteration. This shit hits my dopamine receptors like slamming my face into Conor McGregor's finest nose candy anytime it happens. As someone who would describe themselves as primarily a Ninja Gaiden Black fan who has begun to click with Ninja Gaiden 2, I wouldn't consider myself a die-hard fan of the series or Ryu by any stretch. Don't get me wrong, Ryu is cool as hell, this design is timeless, but I'd be completely open to play a different character as long as they were fun to play. My favorite series ever has not only completely shifted genres, but attempted to change its main protagonist. Multiple times, in fact, and I was completely fine with it. In fact, I was more annoyed when they kept trying to walk back writing out the original character more than the fact that they wrote him out in the first place, or at least attempted to. I know it's no Ryu, no bye for a lot of hardcore fans, and Team Ninja seems to be aware of that, as Ryu is technically playable in part of the story and has his own missions, but this is where the most applicable comparison to other action games comes into play. The comparisons to Devil May Cry 4. Instead of being a 50-50 split like Devil May Cry 4 is, it's more 90-10, as Yakumo is the full-fledged protagonist and Ryu is just kinda there. He has 5 chapters out of the 19, one of which is an immediate rematch with the boss you fought 10 seconds ago as Yakumo, 2 of which are consolidated versions of 2 Yakumo levels in reverse, where you refight those bosses again, but it's 7 years in the past. The next is just a rematch with one of the most annoying bosses in the game, and the last is a short level where you fight 3 groups of enemies before his only unique boss fight of his own, which you then immediately go through this level as Yakumo right after in chapter 19. There is more content in the Purgatory Gates than most of Ryu's levels. At least once you beat the game, you can replay the whole thing as Ryu if you want. So how does he play? Well, he's really fun, I'm not gonna lie. I've been having a blast replaying through the game on Master Ninja as only Ryu, but he legitimately feels like an unfinished character. He only has one weapon with 4 Ninpo on the D-pad arrows. Instead of Blood Raven, he has Gleam mode, which is basically that one fully charged UT Ryu does in Ninja Gaiden Black with the fully upgraded Dragon Sword. Ninpo also runs off this meter instead of having charges like in the first 2 games. I hate that for some reason you have to regain all of the skills you bought as Yakumo via finding them on scrolls and chests scattered throughout his levels. It just makes him feel like an even bigger step back in the mechanical complexity department compared to Yakumo, who by this point in my playthrough had been fully upgraded outside of a few weapon skills I did not have the weapon XP for. Sure, you get to play with him infinitely more than just these few missions after finishing the campaign, but if the main story gives you so little time with him initially after building him up the whole game, why piecemeal all of your mechanics you've already internalized back to you? The removal of on-landing attacks, like my personal favorite, the on-landing X360 spin, which seems to have a pretty high chance of delimbing enemies, makes his non-existent arsenal sting even more, because there is just less going on with him that could have been made up for slightly with the built-in combos and techniques the Dragon Blade had in previous games. While he feels incomplete in the mechanics department compared to Yakumo, the returning enemies from the original games feel like they were designed to be fought by Ryu, at least with how much easier it feels for me to stuff their red flashing attacks with gleam attacks unlike Yakumo's Blood Raven moves. That is until Yakumo gets the Dark Dragon Blade as his last-minute surprise 5th weapon. It's the DMC4 Dark Slayer of this game, as they even share the same input to swap from your main 4 weapons and styles to it. This weapon gives Yakumo Ryu's move list and replaces Blood Raven attacks with Gleam when it's equipped. I don't know how Ryu could look even more like an incomplete character than the fact he is a 5th of Yakumo's move list packaged as a different character that he rounds himself out with at the end of the game. They'd probably have to preemptively show off some sort of DLC that confirms Ryu is getting more weapons at a later date because he was incomplete and most likely put in the game because fans would be pissed if he wasn't playable to some degree at launch. It's bad enough he's being sidelined for this edgelord twink in their eyes. Oh. Joking aside, I don't even know how they're gonna have the on-the-fly weapon swapping for Ryu given how the inputs are currently being taken up by your Ninpo. Very curious to see what they're going to do with that. How HP in Essence functions has been completely reworked. Instead of the multicolored essences of yellow for currency, red for Ninpo, and blue for HP, it is now only these red blood essences. They come in 2 sizes, large and small. They still quickly charge your UT upon absorption. They all heal you a little bit depending on the amount of orbs and size of them. It's a consolidation of the previous system due to Ninpo now being a meter, which fills over time and from hitting enemies. Another system change to push the player for constant aggressive gameplay. This is also reflected in the change to how health works. In the previous games, when you take a hit, let's say a quarter damage for simplicity's sake, half of this damage would be permanent and half of it would be left as a gray health bar like in a fighting game. Once you killed every enemy and the combat encounter ended, you'd heal whatever gray health you currently had. In Ninja Gaiden 4, that 1/4 of your HP bar of damage is split into permanent damage and red health, which can be recovered from hitting enemies. It's a rally system that keeps you aggressive and rewards you for staying on top of enemies and getting hits in. My take is likely to evolve and change as I play the game more and more, and as the game will inevitably get updates along with the eventual Two Masters DLC. But my stance right now is that I think the change to gray health works for lower difficulties where you can take a few hits before dying, but in Master Ninja I think how HP functioned in the previous games works better for it. Dying in 1 to 2 hits just doesn't work with the current implementation of the system and the current balance design of Master Ninja. You lose half your HP from a hit if you're even lucky enough to survive. Most of the time you don't even realize you're getting hit because there is no feedback for you taking damage for some reason, and enemies are so ridiculously fast and fly from off screen. You do not recover enough HP from striking back, and Blood Essence does not recover anywhere close to as much HP as Blue Orbs did in the previous games, and ultimate techniques for some reason seem to leave you minus, so I ended up dying a bunch before I even got control back. So as a result, this makes the game feel like you have to play way too perfect or waste hours of time. So of course players are gonna feel like you have to play incredibly lame or a certain way in order to beat it. I think Master Ninja would have been better if it just made enemies way more aggressive and just increased the numbers of enemies you fight per encounter, instead of every enemy can kill you in one hit if they land a super fast pot shot from off screen. It feels like this should have been saved for an extra gimmick mode like Heaven or Hell. The more I play through Master Ninja, the less fun I have with it. The tutorial at the start is actually pretty good at teaching you how to play the game and giving you an environment to experiment until you get your bearings, as the first few fights in this skippable segment don't have a health bar. It's been one of my biggest criticisms of the series up until now that Ninja Gaiden does a terrible job at teaching you its finer mechanics and how to play the game within the game itself, despite how demanding and punishing they can be. They rely so heavily on guides from dedicated fans or strategy guides that you have to pay real-world money for because the games don't explain basic shit. The weird thing is that they locked a lot of mechanics that Ryu just came with in the prior games behind purchases in the shop. I assume this is not to overload the player with mechanics to the point their eyes start to glaze over from being overwhelmed and do not retain half of the information. Even with the method this currently has in place, I was finding myself forgetting about certain mechanics and not making the most of them when I should be due to the sheer amount of moving parts. But I do think that there are things that really should have been included in this starting tutorial, like Wind Path, Wind Run, and Guillotine Throw should not have been locked until Chapter 4. Their exclusion makes fresh save Master Ninja runs feel way worse, and has completely killed my drive to do one. I'll just be sticking to doing a New Game Plus version where it feels like the game is much more balanced to that, even if I do think that Master Ninja's balance could use some work. It's a massive step up from how poorly they conveyed information in the previous games, where basic shit like clicking in the right stick changes your camera view from first person to controlling an inverted third person camera is just not mentioned anywhere in the game. It's great that game-changing concepts like on-landing ultimate techniques are things explained instead of something that you could go an entire playthrough not knowing it exists. This totally didn't happen to me the first time I played through Ninja Gaiden Black, but I think it could have given you a bit more. Maybe they could add some sort of item or prompt that you could select at the start of the game that gives you more starting moves than the default playthrough. Something like, I've played every Ninja Gaiden before, I know them inside and out, I've beaten them on Master Ninja. Something like Kingdom Hearts 2's level 10 XP critical mode that gives you a bunch of stuff early and rebalances and repaces progression. On the topic of absorbing essence to fast charge ultimate techniques, it does not feel as consistent, fast, or smooth as it does in 1 or 2. Initially I was going back and forth on whether the game has the system from the previous entries where you hold block and it keeps essence where they are floating, allowing you to not absorb them and save them for ultimate technique use bonuses later. After playing and testing it a whole bunch more, I do believe that they are in the game. It's just that sometimes it seems the system is incredibly inconsistent and doesn't do this. Here is me holding block in training room and it flies right towards me. Sometimes Essence just sits on the battlefield forever, other times you jump in the air and instantly everything flies to you. Currently, I just don't understand how it works fully. Another inconsistency with Essence and Ultimate Techniques is how long it takes for essences to spawn out of dead bodies. Sometimes they appear right away, other times it takes multiple seconds, as you could see in the background. This initially made me think that Essence was unresponsive, and I still kind of think this, as even with the upgrades that increase absorption speed, I have clips like the one on screen now where I'm fighting the final boss and the essence doesn't come to me that fast compared to other times. But the more I play and the more I test, I now believe that it is, oh, I'm activating Ultimate Technique chargings on landing and the essence hasn't spawned in yet. And I'm going off of the muscle memory of how fast essence spawned in the previous games. So when I turn my camera over and see the essence floating there and not moving, my initial reaction and analysis was that, oh, this is a system that is inconsistent and not responsive. The auto lock has been something I have complained about being an issue in this series since the beginning. The games would sometimes make you target someone else randomly even though your original target is not dead yet. For games that expect perfection at the highest level, they sure are inconsistent with their rules and functionality of their core systems. It was something I was starting to get used to, and Stockholm Syndrome Accept was simply part of these games, and as my skill improved, I got better adjusting when the game decided it was time to troll me a little bit. It is by far the worst in Ninja Gaiden 4. Part of it is exacerbated because of how far your range is and how easy it is to close the gap in this game, so what would have been a smaller misfire in previous titles turns into room-wide launches in the wrong direction. This is something that cannot consistently be happening in a game where you can die in one hit from basic enemies. Sometimes Ultimate Techniques just fire in complete random directions to dudes off screen a mile away instead of the guy I am standing right in front of and the auto lock red reticle is on top of. In this clip right here, you see me shoot my shurikens as Ryu to an enemy off screen behind me. They literally fire right out of my ass and I die because of it. After doing some more testing, I think the main culprit is how the left stick swaps targets during soft lock, at least during regular combat. No clue why Ultimate Techniques are doing this. Hard lock swapping targets is done by the right stick and doesn't seem to have these misdirection issues. I didn't use it that much compared to soft lock, so maybe others have experienced it with hard lock too. You can see on screen now how the red soft lock reticle is swapping back and forth between these two guys. This is from barely wiggling my stick forward towards the direction of these enemies. The game has attacks that require back to forward motions and 360 spins of the left stick. I don't know how this doesn't constantly confuse the system of who you want to prioritize in a group. The answer is that it probably is constantly getting confused by them due to how sensitive the swapping on the left stick is. This is a massive issue when you need to target an enemy in the middle of a crowd with a power attack that is charging. So many times, usually in Purgatory, where the enemies are the most tightly packed, would I be unable to hit a guy in the center of a crowd with my Blood Raven attacks because the game is prioritizing the wrong enemy, and at that current point I was at, I did not have an easy, fast way to hit multiple enemies with Blood Raven moves. Your primary sword's arena slashing blood attack takes some time to charge. Unless you already have the staff or toolbox equipped, there will be plenty of instances where you won't have the time to swap and charge their attacks to interrupt the enemy. So this is a game that wants you to be constantly moving and doing motion inputs, but also not touching the stick in any way when you are hitting your desired target unless you want to swap to some other jackass possibly a mile away off screen. But even in doing this, it still sometimes happens to me. So I genuinely don't know what the fuck is causing this issue of making you target other enemies for no reason, and what to suggest to change in order to improve and fix this broken, poorly made system. As a whole, the bosses of Ninja Gaiden 4 are a massive step up from from the previous 3 games, which was easily the worst aspect of each of them. The bosses are the thing holding Ninja Gaiden Black back from me considering it a perfect game. I would seriously love a version of Ninja Gaiden 2 where I can play through the levels of that game and just never fight any of the bosses. The bosses contain none of what makes Ninja Gaiden so addictive to play and what makes them completely unique from any other action game on the market. Instead of crowd control and efficiently killing enemies as fast as possible while keeping yourself as mobile as possible and maximizing your safety and invincibility frames, you fight big assholes in front of ledges, horribly oversized monsters you have to swat at the feet of, bosses with zero indicators of why anything does or doesn't work. The bosses of the previous games were riddled with stupid shit like single frame animation cancels into guards and grabs in response to your actions, horrible inconsistencies for openings where it was a complete toss-up if you could hit the boss and deal damage to them or not. You can play out the exact same sequence of attacks at the start of a fight like Doku 15 times, and you'd be lucky if you were able to damage him 5 times, despite there being no indication to the player why one attempt was able to hit him 4 times, another attempt was able to hit him 2 times, and the rest made the blocking sound while you passed right through him, which was visually identical and indistinguishable from the times you were able to deal damage. It's not really a high bar to pass, and I think a good chunk of the bosses in Ninja Gaiden 4 aren't great, but at least they suck in a more conventional action game way rather than in a Ninja Gaiden Black and Ninja Gaiden 2 kinda way for the most part. Some hitboxes are still whack as fuck, especially in slow motion playback, where you can see that they don't visually match the enemies, seemingly hitting and killing you before they even make contact. So Platinum wasn't fully able to remove the series' iconic boss jank. They thankfully don't have random periods of you can't deal damage to me for no apparent reason because the RNG roll decided you couldn't land a hit on me. This alone sets them above the previous 3 games. They are just either really boring like the tank that has 3 moves, oversized monsters like the blue thing with udders or the Tengu dog fighter jet. At least you can interact with them more than you can versus these types of bosses in most other games thanks to countering red attacks with Blood Raven or Gleam. The last shit boss design is of course the focus of my ire for this genre, giant enemies in front of a ledge with the Dark Dragon. God, in further DMC4 comparisons, I can't believe they did the savior again with the Dark Dragon. I get that there really isn't much you can do with a giant city-sized dragon, and it'd be interesting without turning it into a QTE segment or slashing shit on its back, but at least the final boss fight against the copy of yourself is sick. The game does have some cool fights like the battle with Ryu, which is great. I like the first boss of the game even if on rematches he's a total pushover now that you know how to play the game. Kagachi, despite not being in this game at all even though his design is so cool, has the hypest moment in the game where in phase 2 he reveals his other arm. I don't care if this game's story is shit and amounts to we got hype moments in Aura, I love this trope, it's so fucking sweet. If it wasn't for the excessive amounts of Ratchet and Clank grind rail segments, this would still be the weakest part of the game, not counting story. The story, as you should expect at this point, is not good.
No hard feelings.
It's weird that Yakumo is almost a completely different character in Japanese and English. I don't know why they wanted such a disparity in direction, and I feel bad for the English voice actor for the amount of clowning on over the overtly edgy lines they made him read. Some feel so try-hard that it's like a Newgrounds parody of what Yakumo would sound like. Not sure what the English director or whoever made this decision was going for, but I really think it hurts his initial impression for skeptical longtime fans who just want to play as Ryu. Sayori felt like such a waste of a character despite being such an important piece for breaking the curse and is the reason Yakumo betrays his original mission and destiny for the clan, which I can't really blame him. I know if she asked me to team up with her instead of my original objective to serve her head on a platter to fulfill my sole purpose of existence as ordained by my ninja clan, choosing to go on an adventure with her, I'd go, "Oh 7, yes ma'am." They really kept the essence of Itagaki's love for big-breasted blonde women alive with her design. Bless up Itagaki. But then you spent what feels like a third, if not more, of the game trying to get her back from being eaten by an interdimensional demon shark, only for her to die in Chapter 14. I don't get why they made her this human connection for the wet blanket plank of wood that is Yakumo, and then kill her off in the same game. She is the one human connection he had. It's not like Umi or Tyron are exactly pulling any weight here outside of how cool Tyron's design is.
Yakumo, I got rug pulled. All of my ninja coin. It's gone. They've taken it all.
Unless this one line we hear at the end of the game, which isn't subtitled, is supposed to somehow be Sayori and she is still alive, which would equally be dumb, making the previous scenes about her death completely pointless, I don't get why they'd write her out of the series instantly, all for a character arc that feels unsatisfying, unearned, and unrewarding. Ayane shows up for one scene to go, I too am in this game. I have to imagine she will be made playable at some point down the line in a Jetstream Sam Blade Wolf style mini campaign DLC. Otherwise, I don't know why they'd go through the effort of making her best design in the series only for her to show up for 10 seconds, say a single line to Yakumo and Aura Farm before never being seen again. They could easily make this DLC as, here is what Ayane was doing off screen during the main campaign, and just do whatever they wanted. If they don't go through with this, the only other reason I can see for this brief cameo is to simply quell potential anger of longtime fans who would be mad that the first game in 13 years is just getting rid of and forgetting about all of the longtime series characters. The story of Ninja Gaiden 4 isn't great, but it's not like Ninja Gaiden can't have a good story. It's not some impossible task that couldn't work if they really wanted to make something that would stand out. The stories of these games have always just been a vehicle for gameplay and cool shit to happen, which to some extent I can respect. I wasn't coming into this game for a near Gestalt type narrative, and I will be skipping cutscenes on repeat playthroughs, but to its credit, it's not terrible. It isn't some unmitigated disaster and a complete narrative failing of storytelling. It's just kinda whatever. A modern version of hype moments and thinly veiled justifications for gameplay to happen. It comes and goes whenever it needs things to happen. There are twists, but they don't invoke shit because I don't care about characters like Masaki. Sayori's death feels like a waste because I liked her bubbly personality that contrasts with Yakumo's brooding edginess. But I failed to create a connection with most of these characters because they are just disembodied voices that I hear over the radio while I'm going through the pretty boring level design. There is a good amount of post-game content when you beat the game. You can replay the whole story as Ryu, there is a boss trial mode where you can rematch all of the key fights in order to keep the Dark Dragon Blade as a permanent addition to Yakumo's arsenal. There are combat trials, some with gameplay modifiers of their own, like your HP is always ticking down, you can't use Blood Raven or Gleam, or you die in one hit. Personally, I hate that last one, but you know, some people will probably just say skill issue, but I don't really find it that fun. You can thankfully attempt all of the purgatory gates you have found from the main menu, which I always appreciate. This is where you get the Death Wish modifier for challenge runs. I'm still currently working through my Master Ninja playthrough at the time of recording this. There has been so much discourse on whether this is a real Ninja Gaiden game or not, and I'll throw my hat in the ring and say that it is. It isn't the second coming of 2, nor is it the second coming of Black. It has its own direction and identity, but still has the Ninja Gaiden essence, for better and worse. 2 had a complete shift in gameplay priorities from 1 with linear level design and the introduction of obliteration techniques and delimbing of enemies, which if you wanted to give an extremely uncharitable analysis to, would be to say that its inclusion watered down the rock, paper, scissors of Ninja Gaiden Black's masterful combat encounter design to push for lame as shit fishing for D-limbs so you could instantly kill enemies as fast as possible and not interact with them at all. I don't even think that this is true, but in saying it, I hope it helps show how you can easily change the perspective of how differences between the older games can be framed as bastardizations and sacrilege to the original design in the same way that people are talking about 4 right now. While 3's identity is closer to 2 than 2's is to 1, it still does its own thing with the rework to Ninpo, introduction of Steel on Bone, how ultimate techniques function, and yet all of these games aren't being argued are or are not a real Ninja Gaiden game. I understand why the extreme hardcore fans fans of 2 love that original release for what it is, that completely unbalanced console-melting experience that could barely handle the amount of enemies it threw at you on screen just in the first level alone. But even by Itagaki's own words, that game did not get the fine balanced tuning he wanted and was sad about that, and because of the payment dispute with Tecmo over bonuses promised for Dead or Alive 4, he left the company and never made a subsequent rebalance of the game like he did with Ninja Gaiden 1. If you want to say Sigma 2 and 2 Black aren't the intended rebalanced vision that Itagaki wanted to make because he didn't have his hands in their creation, even ignoring how games aren't made by one person and there's possibly some written documentation that he left behind that they used which we don't know about, which is something that I'm completely speculating on, but that's besides the point. That's fair and I'd agree with you, but the true Ninja Gaiden vision phrase that people are slinging around left and right currently isn't something that actually exists. If we are taking Itagaki's vision and word as gospel and using it to completely invalidate 4's existence and design ethos, then it doesn't magically not get to apply to the other games. The verbiage and how we discuss this series needs to be changed, because that true Ninja Gaiden 2 experience people jerk themselves off over doesn't exist, never existed, and sadly never will, because Itagaki never got to work on the series again. He got screwed over by corporate greed and standing up for what he and his team were rightfully owed, then got screwed over by corporate incompetence with THQ bankrupting themselves over a shitty drawing tablet, and the company making the original engine for Devil's Third also going out of business. His career tragically never was the same after leaving Team Ninja, and before we got to see whatever he was planning on making next, he unfortunately passed away a few weeks ago. The man was a visionary. He made some truly special and unique games. Nothing feels like Ninja Gaiden 1 or 2, but the sheer quantity of dismissive takes about this game, calling it Bayo Ninja May Cry Revengeance 4, is just not fucking true. This one tweet that passed my timeline put it best. If Ninja Gaiden requires an extensive list of design elements to be a Ninja Gaiden game, you can't suddenly say it's another game for just having 1 or 2 design elements loosely in common. And Ninja Gaiden 4 does have certain things in common with other Platinum games and action games on the market. But at the end of the day, as much as Ninja Gaiden 4's design is influenced by other games outside of the series by other creators along with modern Team Ninja titles, it still has more than enough of the Ninja Gaiden identity and design ideas. It's doing its own thing, and that's completely fine and honestly in line with the series, as Ninja Gaiden has always reinvented itself between releases. If you've made it this far into the video, I just want to say thanks for watching as always. If you really like the video, please leave a like and comment and pass the video around. If you really like these videos and the channel, maybe consider becoming a patron on Patreon. It is the best way to support me directly, with multiple tiers including a $3 voting tier, allowing patrons to pick what is the next upcoming multi-game review. I also have a $7 tier that allows you to view rough cuts of upcoming videos. Some of those currently include my eventual Drakengard retrospective. I'm now going to shout out all of my $5 and up patrons who really help support the channel. Andy F, Bully, Densha, Turbo Chicken, Mataru, Strawberry Tofu, Scary Dinosaur, Quartz, Kevin Velasquez, Lotto, Saiyan Hegi, Medi Not the Bad Guy, Burley, Dev Welkin, Chikun Highwin, Vaso, TV Head, Friday Night Fragging, Metal Cactus, Ben Johnson, Chichometrius, Ekfrazo, Nicholas Pedinato, Leon, Buckets, Sean the Berserker Fighter, Shisaji, Jacob Hamilton, Ben Olberg, Neutral Guy, Trevor, Kilowog, and Dan XDXDXD10. Thank you so much, everyone. If you're a card game player of any kind, I have a TCG Player affiliate link in the description below. All purchases you make using my link will give me a small kickback. I also have a NordVPN affiliate link, so any plans that you get using my link will also help support the channel. As for what is coming out next, it is currently the very busy season of the year where a million games are coming out, like Silent Hill F, which I haven't had the chance to play yet. There's a million other small releases as well, like Pigface went into early access and Geno Kids went into early access, and I want to try to cover as much as I can during ad season, so I don't really know what's coming out next, but whatever it is, I hope you enjoy it. As always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.